At this point, I'm starting to wonder if Joe is dead. Is Joe really there? If a Joe falls in the forest, is he still being ignored?
Pew pew! Pew pew! Run, 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 run. Welcome to Podages, your critically nostalgic analytical tour through Digimon anime. I'm your host, Jeff Ruberg. This week we're discussing Digimon Adventure 2020, Episode 15, Zudomon's Iron Hammer of Lightning. And my guest this week is one of the managing editors of Anime Feminist and a co-host of the Trash and Treasures podcast. Thanks for coming back on the show, Vrai.
Thanks for having me back. I'm very excited to be here again, talking about these nice kids.
Yeah, and last time I had you on, I think it was a bit of a random episode since your favorite character was Joe, so I'm excited to have you back on for a Joe episode.
I'm gonna talk about my son. I'm happy he's here.
So you were last on for episode 8, which was the that one that was kind of about Yamato and like taking on that fortress. So what have your thoughts been on Adventure 2020 in general since then?
We were so young then. So young and full of hope. I'm still enjoying watching it from week to week. I think every episode has something, at least one thing about it that I really find interesting or fun or like a cool cut. But I am definitely team, you don't know what you're doing, do you, at this point? I don't know what combination it is of, I'm sure the animators have had their plans impacted because of COVID. If there's anything that Shiro Bako taught me, it's that once a production schedule gets a wrench thrown in it, it kind of never recovers. And I suspect I don't know what that's going to look like for a show of this length, but I don't know. The Ultimates run hasn't been good. It hasn't been good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's not true. Koshiro's episode was fun.
Mm-hmm.
That at least felt like it was something related to his character and like a character growth moment.
Do you feel like the problem with this arc has been like it was coming too soon, or just like each individual episode wasn't handled as well as you expected?
I mean, I think it depends. There are parts of it that are, yeah, everybody else has already talked over the fact that, there were these big quests to get everybody's crests and then to get the crest to work in the original, and so it really felt like a big monumental thing when the ultimate evolutions come up, and maybe we'll get megas this time and that's what they'll do it for, but just who knows? We can't know. So putting aside the original and what it did, and maybe it'll get good in the future, because we can't know. We just have the show that we have right now, which is basically 2 completed arcs. I think that some of the individual episodes had a strong idea for what they wanted to do, and the other episodes feel very either like they didn't quite have a distinct thing that they wanted to do for this character, and so whatever it was ended up feeling very pop and swap, like with Sora's episode where Yamato kind of takes all of the big actiony moments, or Taichi's episode, which is punch it until you win because you punched it hard enough the 3rd time. I think I felt a lot of times watching this run of episodes like it's not necessarily even that this or that plot would be a bad thing, so much as that there is no sense of build. Like, it struck me while I was watching this episode that the B plot has such a good sense of exploration in like these areas that are weird and nonsensical, but you get the sense of like Taichi and Mimi really traveling through them and that exploration that you're journeying with them, whereas a lot of these other episodes are just like, and now we're in this place and it's a different place now because we need it to be in a different setting for this plot where we plan to do to work, and there's not really a sense of grandeur about it. Putting aside even what it does compared to the original show, I don't feel any sense of excitement exploring the digital world. I don't really feel a sense of how far they've come. They're just in different places every time, and something will happen and then it stops happening. And that lack of sense of building is there in the ultimate forms, but it's also just this symptom of this lacking grandeur of the plot overall, and it's making me sad the further we go.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like we're getting like slow drips on like the world or the setting or the characters outside of the main 6. Like we're seeing different settings, like you were saying. Each episode's like a different themed level. It's a different, like, this is an ice world. This is a desert world, this is a forest world, whatever. But it doesn't feel like a cohesive whole, and there's no interest in exploring aside from like, oh yeah, we're here, but there's no like we're not meeting. We met like one set of characters in Yamato's episode with Bearmon and Neymon and whatever.
Hmm.
But aside from that, it's like, where is the consistent world that binds all these places together? Like, is there a consistent world? And it's especially, I feel like these different environments feel especially jarring because the like when that episode where they split up and it was like, okay, we can't go forward, we can't go through this dark miasma pool thing, so let's one group will go left, one group will go right, and like I never expected that they would spend so long going through these completely different environments just to go around a single, like, what I thought was a tiny pond. And so
Right.
I'm like, huh, this is a little odd. They're going on this like grand adventure and just to avoid one single location. And like you're saying, the grand adventure doesn't feel we don't feel a sense of grandeur aside from like that one moment with the B plot in this episode.
And it's weird considering how much time they spend on Bergramon. I think that there's no like Dark Souls moment where you get a glance at the landscape and it's like, wow, look at that cool thing over there, and then later you get to that cool thing. The
Yeah.
last time I can think of that is in Sora's introductory episode where they're climbing the trees and they see the island that they eventually get to. Like that's the early episodes kind of had a sense of that, of how things are put together and we're striving towards a goal. But now we're walking places.
Yeah, it feels very much like individual writers or directors or animators got different episodes and like, okay, you design this world, you design this world, and no one's going to connect them.
it's it's become that thing they used to do with cop shows in the 70s in American TV where literally there was just a pool of scripts and then they doled them out and I don't know, make it work for your universe. And that's why Starsky and Hutch has an episode with Satanists on it when they're trying to take their gay lake vacation.
I mean, I think that I wouldn't mind the episodes feeling so disconnected and stuff if there was like if it felt like we actually were getting a little bit of like if each one was a different glimpse into the world more than just like, okay, here's a different setting. And I've heard people refer to these episodes in this arc as a filler arc,
Hmm.
which like I mean, the way that people use the term filler arc I think is both frustrating and fascinating to watch because
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
really just a measure of like, does a fan value this content or not?
Yeah,
And
it really has had a lot of definition drift from its original term, hasn't it?
yeah, like I
Hmm.
used to be a stickler for like, no, this is not an anime adapted from a manga that has a specific set of canon material and that is not additional material added to the canon material. But it's like, okay, that definition like doesn't really matter at this point. It's more just like, does the person who's saying the term feel like it's not adding to what they consider valuable? And I think it's fair to look at these episodes and be like, okay, technically we get new evolutions and we get a bit of a glimpse to the characters, but it's like the actual plot as it's been laid out is like the beginning of this arc, it was like, you all should go to this place. And they're still just trying to get to the place. And we don't know anything more about the villains. We don't know anything more about the world. We don't know anything more about like why the things are happening. So
We know that Leomon exists in this universe. That's
that's
it.
true. Yeah.
Does it kind of feel to you like these episodes could have happened in literally any order, aside of the fact that
Yeah.
they digivolve in other episodes, like putting that aside, the actual plots?
That's a good point. And even these last two, like in Koshar's episode and Joe's episode, they avoided having like Metal Greymon, I think was the only other ultimate that appeared. So
Mhm.
they could have, swapped Mimi for Koshar's episode, or they could have swapped Sora's for Joe's episode.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Which I don't know if that's on purpose or if that's just an unfortunate side effect of the writing overall, but I think that is maybe what a lot of people are sensing with this lack of build up.
Yeah.
God, it just well, now that we're depressed, do you want to have a fun time talking about this episode?
Well, what have you thought about the new ending song?
I love it. Like, that is the most excited I've been in the last couple episodes. Like, I know it's a little bit goofy at the end where you have Yamato experiencing a happy emotion, and that just doesn't
Yeah.
happen. He's a sad, depressed boy. But that little minute and a half piece of animation is so cute and packs so much character into these little 5-minute bits, tiny pieces of animation, and has that sense of we're coming together and we're having a time and we're working through troubles. And that's what I want that show to be all the time. But all I have is this little ending theme. And I'm both happy and sad every time I see it. But no, I think it's great. I love sort of paper cutout style animation in opening and ending themes. I am a little concerned, like other folks, that Hikari isn't in it.
Hmm.
But I guess it's not uncommon for the show to put her off. It would be cool if we got some character development for her earlier than Takaru, but at this point I'm not super confident in this show's ability to do more than not be worse than how the original show treated its female characters.
Hmm.
That's my highest bar now.
Yeah, and has it passed that bar? Hmm.
Well, Mimi is delightful. Does that count?
Yeah. Mimi's still a joy.
That's not the same thing, but and it was I who was forced to regret my words and deeds. It's not just that the animators don't care about animating Pyomon's evolution specifically, it's that they don't care about anyone who's not Taichi or Yamato.
Yeah, I think I've gotten used like I've come to accept now that it's like, okay, definitely they put Taichi Yamato on like this higher tier, and then whatever scraps everyone else gets, if it's like a really good scrap, like that's all I can expect. And
Mhm.
I just come to accept it now.
Yeah, and the 9-year-old me is like, "Yeah, Yamato's the coolest though."
Yeah.
9-year-old me was stupid.
uh, uh, a side note about the way the show has handled female characters, I had this thought while watching the episode and watching Sora be completely fridged the episode.
Yeah.
And I mean literally fridged with ice, but whatever. And I realized that like even when I think of Digimon doing female representation right, there's such an archetype. I'm pretty sure I haven't thought this through fully, but I'm pretty sure every single female Digimon character partner, the Digimon is either a bird, a plant, or a cat.
Mm.
I think there's the only three archetypes in all of Digimon. I'm pretty sure. I mean,
I mean, Renamon, everybody's favorite furry.
which is a
I mean,
form of cat,
cat-like,
right?
I
Yeah,
guess.
cat-like. But and I guess Jerry. Okay, I guess Leomon is cat-like a little bit. Those two are both stretching it a little bit.
Mm.
But when you just think about like how much diversity there is among the male characters, it's a little frustrating.
Kind of the Digimon version of female fighters in RPGs usually get either bows or whips, which are distance weapons,
Hmm.
or they get rapiers sometimes, which are the feminine, delicate version of a sword.
Right,
Rapiers are
right.
cool, but like that's the sort of unconscious ethos there. Like I
Yeah,
wonder if it's similar, like because birds and cats and that they're all feminine things, and so are plants and flowers. They inspire nurturing and growth. I don't know. I truly don't think a lot of times this stuff is conscious. It's just like you're building off of a history of these things that have been done in stories before, which go back and back and back until you hit, these old embedded stereotypes and shit words.
right. Yeah, and it's like the more you just go on base like what feels right, the more unchecked stereotypes and sexism can sneak in. But
Which, I kind of feel like this show is rushing so hard to meet deadline every week that there's no time to think about anything. We have to get a show out. We have to slide them across ourselves.
yeah, at least this episode, speaking of sliding things across the screen, at least this episode had a plausible reason for people to be sliding across the screen. But yeah, let's dive into this week's episode. Episode 15, Zudomon's Iron Hammer of Lightning, aka Bang Bang Zudomon's Iron Hammer, aka Sora got Frigid Emon. And the spoiler policy for this episode, like all weeks, we are going to be talking about everything that was in the Crunchyroll episode, including the title and preview for next episode, but not including the stuff that's out there online about text synopses for future episodes or any titles beyond episode 16, which is next episode. So yeah, right, what did you think about this episode in general?
My son did the Yu-Gi-Oh hand, and that was really cool. I legitimately had this trained pop, like fan pop moment of, oh my god, it's the dramatic gesture and his hands at the camera. I love that.
It was so dramatic. I was like looking back at the screenshot, I'm like, I don't remember this moment being that dramatic, but like, wow, he just played like five blue eyes white dragons in one turn. Like
It's so good. Oh, my Digimon has no pathetic moves. But, no, I thought I really liked the B plot for this episode, actually.
Mm.
Mostly it was not the worst of the Ultimate episodes, but definitely not as good as Koshiro's.
Hmm. Yeah, I wish all of the B plots throughout this arc would have, because I think every episode has had a B plot, I believe, and I wish all of them might have been anywhere near this interesting. Because we got a whole bunch. So we got like I got a couple of different environments. We got Mimi's fun personality. We got a huge twist, even without the huge twist. Like if it just had had those bits of Mimi's levity in other B plots.
Yeah, I feel like that B plot has had the closest to what people have talked about missing, the fact that this is a more action-oriented, less comedic character story. This B plot really felt like a little glimpse of what we've been missing with that, where they're just goofing around and it's a little bit scary, but it's also kind of neat and you keep stumbling onto something cool.
Hmm. What is speaking of this arc and other Ultimate Evolutions and Mimi? Because I believe like Joe and Mimi were pretty close up there in terms of your favorite characters,
Mhm.
if I recall correctly. And so, what did you think about Mimi's Ultimate Evolution?
I didn't like it. Um, no, I also thought it had some neat moments. I thought that, this show has become a question of you it gets one or two cool splash out moments, and that's I don't need it to be lavishly animated all the way through, but I think that episode really showed how the animators could be smart with limited animation. You guys
Hmm.
talked about the death scene and how fairly minimal it is when you actually try to capture it, but it was really good in framing. And I felt like there was a lot of really good just technical achievement in that episode, but I wish that Mimi had gotten more to do
Hmm.
because it's not I'm not upset that she's a caring character, That's also the point of her introduction episode, but that was about her being actively protective of others. And even if you'd drawn back to that at that point where you're connecting to her first episode where she was protecting people and now she's being protected and her having feelings about that in a callback way and trying to interface with this Digimon with Gardramon at all besides sort of staring blankly at him and being worried about Palmon. And I really like Lilymon's evolution. She's definitely gotten the best one so far, I think. I love all the small details about it. And, the Andromon thing is weird. There are so many things they could do with that, and maybe they'll call back to it, but I'm getting kind of tired of saying, oh, maybe they'll come back to this opportunity they missed. Maybe in episode 987 of One Piece, it'll all make sense, these female characters they didn't care about.
Oh yeah, maybe. So you've seen Fullmetal Alchemist, right?
Yeah, I've seen the '03 version, yeah.
Okay. That's the version I was going to call back to. That like I remember at the time watching it when I was in high school, and I was like, equivalent exchange doesn't make any sense. Like there should be all this excess energy going somewhere, and then at the end they were like, actually the excess energy was going. Huge plot twist that I don't fully want to spoil if people haven't seen the original Full Alchemist, but there's a huge plot twist about like where that excess energy is going, and so it's like, oh, maybe that's where all the female agency has been going this whole season.
Yeah, and sometimes a show glosses over obvious like sounding things because they are gonna do something with it, but
Hmm.
this show hasn't inspired that level of trust in me. The other thing I was thinking about with the talk about the translation of her crest and what that kind of means and sort of the grossness associated with purity, even if there are also different sort of cultural connotations there.
Hmm.
I still think it would have been very cool if her crest had been translated as some version of like idealism, because that gets across that sense of guilelessness and straightforwardness, but it's also an active thing. It's something you pursue, which even sincerity is kind of like, what does that mean? And it would have tied into Mimi getting angry about Gardramon's death because she's had this idea that she could protect people and no one will get hurt, and then somebody dies protecting her, and we could have had it all. We could have had a real character arc and she could grow, learning to how she's going to take care of others, but things just kind of happen and then we move on and nobody talks about it afterwards. No one ever talks about things that happen in any given episode after they happen.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. It's just lots of stuff's been happening. People occasionally talk about things when it's very important for the episode, but yeah, no one's discussed. That was something I remember. when I rewatched Adventure, really appreciating that like they're constantly debating things and like having discussions that like feel like they aren't necessary for the plot. It's like you could just have them decide to do this, but instead they're going to actually argue about it and come to a conclusion based on their reasonable perspectives. And yeah, here it's just
And
mm,
if you want Mimi to be a pacifist character, which clearly she's not because she's introduced, setting up traps, although I guess you could argue that that's indirect confrontation and also the series is built around everything building up to punchy fights. But
yeah.
if you want her to be a character who doesn't believe in killing, first of all, you have to acknowledge that you're killing these characters, and then it has to mean something that Lilimon's evolution is built on her being angry and her not being able to forgive somebody. Why that should be so meaningful and it's just nothing.
And like if her personality is around not fighting or something, then she shouldn't have an evolution that is literally a boxer where like
Mhm.
they take joy. And I take tons of joy as a viewer in watching her punch things and watching her beat things up. So like if they're like, oh well, actually, well, yeah, I feel like yeah, this version of the show has given me that she's not pacifist at all. She's just it's fun to watch her punch things, and then I feel like the more I look back on that episode, the more it was like Mimi was sad. Sadness activated evolution.
Mhm.
She's the sad character,
She's
and
sad. Well, her crest is a teardrop. That
right,
means sadness.
yeah.
It's my sadness. And Gardramon himself was so sweet, even if the weird hetero-coded love story of him giving a flower to a child is weird. That whole thing was weird. The blushing, and I don't. But like the Gardramon was very well animated for being basically nonverbal, and
Mhm.
oh, I wanted to like that episode, but just nah.
Yeah, in like in a slightly different context, I feel like there isn't that much heterocoding. It's just like based on the trust that I have from the rest of the show. It's like, I mean, the show has not given me faith that they are going to avoid gender norms and expectations. So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, it's one of
yeah,
those things where like this could just be a things like that aren't can be decoupled from like normative storytelling traditions to be sort of more general, but I don't feel like again this show has really not built that trust for me. It feels like whenever it gets in a rush it will kind of slip back into these not even malicious but thoughtless storytelling patterns, and its female characters end up being the ones getting short shrift about it, which is too bad because I like Sora and I like Mimi and
yeah. It's like whenever they get good moments to shine, it's like kind of counter to the overall plot. Or like it's not their characterization is the first thing to go when they need to accelerate things, and the show has been all about accelerating things. So
mhm.
uh,
Or it'll be just it'll be nice I thought Sora's episode was conceptually solid. I like that she is the protective character, and I like that that becomes for her this case of this stubbornness of I'm going to protect people and put myself on the line to do it, but then Yamato ended up actually doing the saving while she sort of ran distraction, which feels like their roles should be swapped.
yeah, it was like all based around. Well, she's that has the bird Digimon, and the bird
Mhm.
Digimon needs to do the bird thing. So like, yeah, I feel like they should have written the plot better to have had the bird Digimon have the active role instead
Right.
of
Like
yeah,
maybe she has to maybe she has to bring the giant bee fortress down so that they can
yeah.
safely get out or something like that.
Yeah, instead of it being like there's been so much praise for the series for not being when the Digimon have a fight, it's not as simple as just do the ultimate attack or do their finisher move and then win the
Mhm.
day. But a lot of battles have kind of boiled down to that, and especially hers. There, it was like the extent that Garudamon was involved in the episode was basically do the attack. Okay, you did the attack. Cool.
And I know it's cool to see there's been some cool core fight choreography throughout these
Yeah,
episodes, and I get that for a lot of returning fans, the novelty is pretty great, but honestly, I would rather have the longer period of time spent on characters doing interactions and interfacing with various Digimons, and then just have the one scene where they evolve and do the one attack and the battle is over, than this more action oriented series that foregoes so many of those interactions. And part of that is just my personal narrative preferences, but
yeah, I think that's totally fair because I think in the moment it's cool to be like, oh man, a Digimon touched one of Mammothmon's horns. Whoa, we've never seen that before. They actually touched a horn and did something with a horn. But like, we're not going to remember that weeks from now. like we do how well Joe is actually characterized in the episode. So
Yeah.
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 On that note,
Welcome to the sad cast.
Joe's characterization, I
I can't believe this is an episode where Sora gets sick and it does not involve Joe doing any doctoring at all.
yeah, I wonder how much that is like purposely distancing themselves from the original, like the details of the original series of like all the stuff about Joe's doctor stuff in the original, or it's just sloppy. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, no, I mean, I think that that would be a valid thing to do if they wanted to go in a different direction, but you introduced him being really concerned about his tests because he wants to be a doctor, but then if you want him to have his character episode not be about him being a doctor, maybe address that he wants to be known for doing more than that?
Well,
Something?
I don't recall them in his introduction episode for this series him mentioning anything about doctorhood.
No, yeah, I could have sworn he mentions that it's because he comes from a line of doctors and he's gonna go to
Mm.
medical school. I could be wrong. It's been a minute since I haven't rewatched his intro episode.
Yeah, it has been a while for me as well, so I'm not sure.
So yeah, maybe
um,
I am backfilling from my knowledge of the original, but it just seems weird to me because
right?
that's
No, yeah.
so much of who his character is. To not even address we're doing something different.
Yeah, there was a moment where he was standing near, like there was a shot where it showed Sora with the injury and him in the background or something, and I was like, it's weird to see these two together and it not be about, Joe trying to heal her, or like he knew what to do because of, whatever general training he had.
Well, and especially because they give him that line where Sora gets hurt and he puts together like, "Oh, it's like a virus."
Right, right.
Like that's so specifically you are studying stuff in that even if you don't want to go in that direction, it's a case where your studying is perhaps relevant to the situation, maybe? Eh?
Well, I think this is maybe one, I don't want to call it subversion, but one maybe divergence from the original that
Mhm.
I think is interesting because like you would totally expect for an episode where Sora gets injured for basically Yamato to run off and then maybe Joe to get an arc about protecting Sora, like staying by Sora and like
Mhm.
being the one left behind and protecting her. So it's kind of cool that he got his like own little action movie, go off on his own, be the star. When I
Yeah.
think about it that way, I kind of appreciate it.
Yeah, I could see where they're going with that. Although if they wanted to do that, I wish that because they built up in the last episode during the B plot that Yamato kind of doesn't like Joe or thinks he's annoying or
Hmm.
there is a potential conflict brewing there. And I was ready for this episode to be about okay, Joe is, faithfulness or reliability, so Yamato's going to get sick of him doing his I'm the leader shtick and be like, "No, you're not. Stop it. You're really annoying." And then Joe has to learn that part of being a reliable leader is not that you're showboating and asking people to respect you. It's that you make these hard decisions and you are the one people can count on when it comes down to it, which I feel like is what they were going for in that final conflict where he stands his ground, but there's so little build up to it beyond shonen fight do now that it just didn't do anything for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding it hard to know how much weight to give to his whole wanting to be the leader shtick. Because if it's just a gag and it's just like repeated gags throughout the series, and it's not really like affecting the emotional through line, okay. Because I feel like I read it that way, that it's like, okay, this isn't really what his episode is about, and then the actual like the his arc towards the end of the episode was about a totally different thing, and then at the end of the episode he still was like, oh, I'm the leader now, oh no, I'm not, oh no. But I feel like maybe that's just my own being tired by that joke and not thinking about it much and then wanting it to be separate. So yeah.
And maybe for me it was, I'm tired of this joke, I would like them to address it, and then stop talking about it.
Yeah. Because I kind of I appreciate his development by the end of the episode of about like being kind of like him being kind of aimless until he was given a role,
Hmm.
and like it seemed like once he was given a role he was like, okay, I have this thing to do for the team, here's this thing that I can do, that is where he really like kicked into gear and was able to be effective and useful and take pride in it. And then the thing that triggers the evolution by the end of it is when his role was just to be a diversion. And then he's like, okay, well, now they're going to cross the bridge. And if they cross the bridge, we're going to be in danger. And I could call for Yamato for help. Like, Yamato is explicitly asking, like, do you need help? I can come over there. And he's like, no, I don't need help. We got it on our own. and he has like a reason for it. Like, he does say that it's someone needs to stay by Sora, so you need to stay by Sora. But it felt to me more like he was saying like I want to go above and beyond the role that I was given. Like I was given a role to divert, but also like I want to have my own a role that I define and like a responsibility that
Mm,
like go beyond the things that society has expected from me.
mhm.
So I appreciate it from that angle. Like I was thinking about it more from the perspective of someone who's like, he has these expectations from his family about like what to do in school and stuff. And instead of just living up to those expectations exactly to a T, he's going to defy them and be like, okay, no, I want to do this other thing instead, or maybe this bigger thing instead. And I'm going to like struggle until I get that bigger thing. And it's not just about fitting society standards for me, it's about fitting my own expectations for myself. But I don't know. It feels like a bit of a reach to read into it that much.
No, I think that's really good analysis. I also think you might have torn something reaching out to meet the writers that far. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a really good character read. I also think that in practice, because it didn't read for me watching. I guess is
Mhm.
my thing. Because to me, it was a combination of sort of this is just his champion evolution episode all over again, where he's sort of scared and wants to run away, but then he doesn't. He steps up at the last moment. That was what he did his last episode too. And also, he already has a role on the team that we establish at the beginning of the episode. Like, if it would make, like, if that's what you want to do, I guess it would make more sense to me to be like, for them not to need him to do anything, and then he steps up and is like, no, I'm a part of this team, you can count on me. Or like
Mhm.
they ask him to do something and he flakes out, and then he comes back and is reliable and stands his ground. But at the episode opens with them being like, all right, we're going to go over this mountain and then we'll get to the river. And Kakamon, that's where you guys are going to be a thing. And that's a thing that only you can do. Yep.
Which
Okay.
turned out to not be true
No,
because
it wasn't. They got across the river without him.
yeah. I really did love maybe it's a good point to transition to the recap, but we've already talked about a bunch of the episodes, so I might skim through most of it.
Sorry, listeners. I've ruined your
No,
beautiful.
no. It's a good discussion. So the episode starts off with Digimon Encyclopedia for Goemon, and we learn that marching fishes are his followers, and that Koshiro wonders how they're always standing by, which, none of that is new information, but except that I guess even Koshiro doesn't understand how marching fishes work. They are the magic of the digital world.
This does raise a lot of questions about all those really enthusiastic fan cams that are, I guess, just throwing themselves to their death out there in the desert a few episodes ago.
Yeah, there's moments where like they just come out of nowhere and then like hit an enemy and then disappear again. It's like, okay.
All
I
right.
guess he can summon them from the void and send them back to the void afterwards. So the episode starts off with Bergemon flying Yamato, Sora, and Joe, and then Bergemon lands. They discuss what the landscape looks like ahead, and I was really frustrated here because Yamato is talking about like, oh, the rendezvous point that we established with Taichi and the others is up ahead, and I was frustrated by this the last episode or a couple episodes ago too. But like
Mm.
that isn't what they discussed. What they discussed was that they would go the two different routes to decide which one of them was viable and then figure out which one of the two was viable and then go that way. Not if they think they're both viable, then there was no reason to split up in the first place. But
Right, especially since they're not looking for anything along the way. They're
right,
just trying to get to a singular point.
yeah. So like they definitely the writers at some point forgot the original reason for splitting up. So oh well, it
Womp
serves the
womp.
narrative better. So I can't complain too much. But
Yeah.
uh, oh yeah, but this is the moment that we were just talking about that like when basically like Sora and Yamato are discussing what to do, and Joe is gonna hang in the back because he's being a nervous wreck, whatever, and they say that like, okay, Gomon, like we're gonna do this, we're gonna get to the river, then Gomon's gonna evolve into Kakamon, we're gonna cross, and then Gomon just like turns to Joe and is like, "Did you hear? Did you hear? Like my role's coming up soon." And I was like, "Oh my god, Gomon's adorable. This is the
Gomamon
cutest
is
thing."
so sweet. He's the best. I did not sufficiently appreciate Gomamon when I was a child. This precious son.
I also love how he's precious and he also like partakes in the ribbing of Joe. Like there are moments where he's like laughing and he's like supporting Joe, and then there's time moments where he's laughing at Joe, and I'm like, he's perfect.
Yeah, he hits that really good balance that I of sort of being a little bit teasy and poking Joe out of his shell, but he's also not too like he never crosses over that line. Like he's the
Mhm.
very ideal friend in that way.
Right. Yeah, like I think if Joe were like a literal IRL real person and Gomon were a real character, making like laughing at him and stuff, I think I would find that not good friend behavior. But when it's a TV show and they're all fictional concepts, like it's fun to watch Gomon laugh at Joe a couple times,
Mm-hmm.
even though for the most part he's always supportive. Yeah, and during the discussion, Joe is frustrated he's not in charge, and yeah, I
Because
guess
this
we.
is the wacky. Because they gave him a second wacky joke besides sick to his stomach, and we should all be grateful.
uh, yeah, like I appreciate. I thought it was fine when it was like the first time he's new to this group, he's just getting used to things, and it's like maybe like he's used to the role he's been given in society, being the oldest one when he's in a group of people that are younger than him. But like the fact that he hasn't been able to adapt is like just making him unlikable when it comes up.
Yeah, I didn't mind it the first time either,
Mhm.
but either do something with it for his character or do something with it, have one other character acknowledge it. Like at this point I'm starting to wonder if Joe is dead. Is Joe really there? If a Joe falls in the forest, is he still being ignored?
Oh man, we need to do like it'd be the best like clickbait. Joe is dead in Digimon Adventure 2020 YouTube video. Oh
But that's just a game theory.
yeah.
Jesus, I'll see myself out.
Oh, yeah, like because there's so much that could be like really evocative about Joe feeling like he's not contributing enough because he should be the leader, and instead it's just a joke. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a it's a hard tightrope to walk because like so much of Joe's character has always been kind of a joke, or like he's always been used for such comedic effect that I can understand that it's hard to find the line of like what to make fun of and what to treat seriously.
Hmm.
But it's disappointing.
But this isn't it.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Mammothmon slash Mammon, I just find it so weird calling them Mammon. Like Mammothmon is a much less awkward name. Anyway, the mammoth-like Digimon and Yukidarimon show up and try to stomp them, and Yukidarimon punches Piyomon, Sora protects her from an ice beam, gets hit instead, and then she gets infected, and then they have to escape because Mammothmon caused an avalanche. Speaking of Sora getting fridged in this way, have you seen, I forget if you've seen Digimon Savers slash Data Squad?
No, I've only seen the two adventures.
Oh, okay, okay. There's my favorite instance of fridging in Digimon is so Yukidarimon, also the dub name is Frigimon, right? And there's in Digimon Data Squad, there is a mom-like character who is a Frigimon who gets fridged. And I was like,
Oh,
oh my god, they fridged Frigimon? Come on.
the jokes, they were too potent.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so then in the B plot, Taichi and Koshiro are in a rocky flatland, and this we are saying it's good that they had like a sense of grandeur and stuff for like this weird environment, but this was so weird to me. Like there are a lot of craters and there's a weird path carved out. For a second, I was like, is this the path that Ogrmon's fist, like that attack that like laid out a trail? I was like, that makes no sense because they're not on the straight route that he laid out anymore, and this is in the middle of nowhere and way far out from where he did that. But I was confused, like what would have caused. Actually, it's reminding me of Decadence now because Decadence I think has a similar
I was going to
vibe.
say Apare Rodman, which I guess shows that between the two of us, this every setting in this is very desktop screensaver or hyper real environment, which I'm fine with. Like, it's the digital world. That makes sense to me. Everything is like your perfected ideal of a place. I can't wait till they get to the rolling green hills of the Windows backdrop.
I can't wait for them to get to another place that has no characters in it. Is a desolate wasteland that I guess adds in a post-apocalyptic vibe if you think about it. But I don't think they're implying that. I don't know.
No, I think that that's fewer things that they have to animate.
Right. Oh, yeah, but this also, like we were saying about like the different environments feeling like they're very disconnected. And I think it's the moment in this B plot where Taichi asks Koshiro which direction they're supposed to go. And like Koshiro's looking at his laptop and he's like, okay, this is the direction to go. And it's like, how did you end up like the scene just starts, they're in the middle of a thing, and they're like, which way should we go? Okay, let's walk in that direction. But like that's not how life works. Like they were walking in a direction before they got to that point. What would cause them to like stop and be like, okay, now let's reassess where we're going? Like I just feel like it was written like they didn't think about how they got to that point, or which I mean is true for both like the literal plotting of those characters in that moment, but also like we see all these different environments. We never see the connections between them. We never see like, oh, where does I mean I guess in this episode we saw the edge of the mountains and the river, but like when they go from what did Sora's group go from? They went from a desert to a forest to icy mountains, and it's like we never really saw the borders between those different regions.
Not even in the
So
cool sense of the original adventure, where it's a very it's a the one terrain just stops and now it's another, and that's weird and unusual and jarring.
Right, that'd be cool to depict, like,
Yeah.
but, well, it's all just left to the periphery outside of the camera, but,
Mhm.
yeah, and this is another at this point, I think I'm just nitpicking, but, like, how Mimi found those Kiwimon, like, it was the moment of her riding the Kiwimon is fun enough that I don't really care about how she found them and how that moment happened because it was fun and wacky enough that it was a ride. It was fun to go along that ride.
Mhm. Yeah, like, there are complaints I could make about the B plot, but I was having fun, and so I don't want to yell at it.
Yeah, like, you can suspend disbelief pretty easily if you're having fun. It's only
Mhm.
when you're not having fun that really matters. So back to the A plot.
Speaking of,
Speaking of not quite having fun, but we see that Gurumon saved everyone. Sora's virus is spreading. And they need to warm up with fire. So Yamato asks Joe to distract Mammothmon and company so that they can get it to the other shore and heat her with fire when a fire wouldn't attract the attention of Mammothmon. So yeah, basically Joe does his whole action movie montage, distracts the Yukidarimon, runs out, jumps on Ikakumon, gets them all chasing down the mountain.
the leap across the crevasse is very cute, where they
Oh
just
yeah.
have Joe flung around, holding on to two very, very tenuous bits of hair. That was my favorite bit. That was my other favorite bit of animation in this episode.
Oh yeah, like when he flings off and then when he lands and like flings back and it
It's very cute.
yeah, yeah. There are multiple moments where they're like, "Oh no, we crossed the crevasse. They can't clearly cross the crevasse. Oh, they crossed the crevasse. Oh no, we got to a cliff. Like let's knock them off. Oh no, we got knocked off the cliff too. Oh no, let's cross the river. Oh, they can cross the river too. Oh, okay, we get it.
This mountain is infinite and it loops.
Infinity Mountain. But yeah, basically skipping ahead to yeah, they basically all that action stuff happens and
It is weird how it doesn't leave any moments to breathe. Like, they get away across the crevasse and then the chase is immediately back on and they're chasing, and like there's no breather so that we're allowed to relax so that then we can be worried about it again.
yeah, it's kind of just like this long extended like complaining about the plot again. Like I remember at the beginning of the episode they're talking about like we're gonna cross these mountains. But then what they actually do in the episode, they're always going downhill, which doesn't make any sense because they were going to cross over a mountain. But anyway, even ignoring that part, like it's like the plot of the episode is just constantly going downhill, keep going downhill, keep going downhill. And it I don't know. I mean, it makes time flow. Like to me, I was like, I feel like most of these episodes of the show have made me be like once the ad break interstitial thing comes up, I'm like, half the episode's over. What? We barely set up the episode. What? Nothing's happened yet. And this is maybe one of the few episodes where I felt like that came up and I was like, oh, that feels like half an episode.
Hmm.
But I don't remember at that point how much of the chase had actually. I think maybe the chase had just started. But basically, in terms of meaningful things that happen, we kind of lied over it just to the end of it when they try to cross. Kakamon gets to the water and they think they're safe, but then Mammothmon freezes the water and starts to cross over as well. And then they get to the moment which I think we discussed a bunch earlier about Joe taking a stand and deciding they can't cross the bridge. And I think I've come around to what you're saying that like it really is just the shonen like I need to step up, I need to do my thing. Like they will not pass Gandalf moment more so than it is like an actual inspection of his role in society and everything.
Like, I think it could have. There are so many things this episode could have been with only one or two little changes, but it's potentially a bunch of things and actually none of them, I think.
Mm,
Which is a shame because I think Joe is. Comedy characters are hard, but the reason that they're beloved, really good ones, is that there is so much complexity there if you know how to balance it. And Joe is such a funny character of he's high strung and he's neurotic and just a big mood, but also he's neurotic about everything because he has all this pressure on him all the time, and he has his big. I want him to be Jacuzzi Splot from Bakano in this episode is what I want from him. Like, that's the ideal version of the characterization they've kind of put Joe into in this version, where you have this big scaredy cat who steps up when the moment calls for it, and it's just not there. It's not, there's no care in the build up. There's just the starting moment and the climactic moment, but the journey in this journey show is being neglected.
mm. The journey has been neglected for the adventure, and even the adventure is a little bit less adventurous.
A bit. It's actiony. Every episode must end in an action punch 'em up, and it isn't mandated. And boy, is it hurting things.
Mm,
Somebody
yeah.
in your replies there mentioned the episode where Izumi gets his curiosity stolen, and all of a sudden that episode came rushing back to me as if 20 years ago hadn't happened. And that's the kind of stuff that the old adventure could pull off, and I forget these episodes 3 days after they happen.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. Like these are all like they're flashy, they're animated mostly well. But like these scenarios aren't so hard hitting that like it's hard to imagine. I mean, even if we're not, we can never fully know what it's like to watch this as a kid again. Like if we
Right.
were 8 to 10 or whatever when we first watched this, but like
We're old and shriveled and bitter about the
yeah,
world.
but it's hard to imagine like episodes like this hitting as hard as well. I think because like okay, there were those highlights from Adventure, like Izzy's episode with the Vedamon sucking out his curiosity. But like, I am as much as I liked Joe, I'm kind of hard pressed to remember his actual like crest activation in the original show. It's like it feels like
Yeah.
it just kind of happened while they're on the way in the water through Tokyo, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh well, he didn't get it before, so here it is. Okay,
Yeah, that's I mean, it's also fair to say that nostalgia plays a little bit of a role here when we talk about original adventure because not every episode of the old show was solid gold. Again, I'd liked O2, a show that was arguably more misses than hits. But screw you, it was great.
yeah, I appreciate that about it now that it's like, okay, if someone, a lot of the fans who admire Adventure, it's like they're trying to ignore all of Adventure's flaws. Like Adventure was a perfect series. It was amazing. It was so well written. It was so perfect. But at least like people who appreciate Adventure Zero Two, it's like, no, this was like a mess on so many levels, but that's why we love it. Like we love the mess. And I'm like, okay, I much more connect with that attitude.
Listen, we trash people know what we're about.
Yeah. So back to the episode. When Ikakumon evolves to Zudomon, I thought this evolution sequence was actually really nice. Like it, I think
Yeah,
if you were to analyze the length of it, like it wasn't that long, but it had enough like dynamic movement and it felt good.
it did. I was really pleasantly surprised by that, actually. I mean, I think my actual thought in the moment was, oh, this one's for the furries. That's nice.
Yeah, that moment where he kind of like Ikakumon shifts into like the base form, basically the naked form of Zudomon without the shell on or without his new hair and stuff. It was like, okay, this is a very sexualized rabbit. Okay, okay,
All
sure,
right, sure.
okay.
It's up there with Lilymon in terms of this isn't long, but it feels lovingly done. And that's all I want. That's all I wanted is for the whole episode to be to have the emotional care of that 20-second animation.
Yeah. And in the evolution sequence, a bunch of people pointed out how there is basically a nod to when his shell snaps onto him. It like we basically like see a like form of another Digimon that like appears for a moment and like does a little howl, and then like disappears and turns into the shell and snaps on his body, which is a nod to. I'm not sure if it's actually in the like official lore where he gets the shell, but there is basically Arkelomon, which is another Digimon that has basically that same shell. So I think the assumption is that that's where in the lore Zudomon gets the shell from. It's a
Oh, that's super
little
cool.
it's a little incestuous though because Arkelomon is basically one of the so in Zero Two you know how like all of the armor evolutions
Uh-huh.
there are a bunch and it's like they only show the partner Digimon evolving into two of each of them whatever but it's
Right.
like there are all these designs for all the other combinations and Arkelomon is one of those. I think it's Armadillomon with wait no that's not right. I'm gonna say it's Armadillomon with the crest with the Digi-Egg of Sincerity slash reliability, but that's Samarimon. So who is it? Well anyway, it's some base rookie Digimon plus Joe's crest.
Huh.
So or like but the Digi-Egg, the whatever they're called, the Digimental of Joe's crest. So it's like or it kind of comes from Joe's evolution line already. So it's not like a completely foreign Digimon that like Zudomon stole the shell from. So I don't know.
I mean, as a big dummy who doesn't know anything about Digimon lore, it tracks for me. I know a lot of people came up with some really cool theories about War Greymon's evolution sequence and maybe like some spooky foreshadowing, but
Mhm.
I do also like I think that's actually a moment where this show is remembering what it wrote earlier on because it has this whole thing about cycles and rebirth and the fact that they've come from these older hero Digimon. So like I like the idea that their sequences have these kind of ghostly images of Digimon who've come before. That's neat to me.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. That it's like like it could be more of like a reference to like maybe in the way Zudomon naturally evolved before was to like defeat an enemy and take on its shell, and this is like
Mhm.
harkening back to that.
Yeah, like I think that that's a potentially really cool thing. I just want to cry for the people for these moments when the show is clearly made with love and care and these cool ideas pop up.
It's like there's enough nostalgia in the premise of the show remaking Adventure that fans like us can stick around long enough to then get to these like bits of cool love and care, and then it's like, okay, this is like kind of the reason why we're still watching the show.
Mhm. Well, and I think the people who are working on this show care about it.
Mhm.
I think that they are probably crushed under a number of factors, including the literal plague outside and also the fact that you can't do too much that's weird and creative because this is a legacy franchise and we have toys to sell.
Yeah, I am. There is an aspect to how the toys are being sold though that makes me like super fascinated because
Really?
like they have this like this legacy of all these characters and all these villains and stuff, and so it's like, but they also need to invent new ones and stuff, and it's like how they. Now, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh, this seems like a nightmare from a logistical standpoint because like you need to coordinate the like announcement and like unveiling of these characters in this lockstep way that like, that sounds like so much corporate bureaucracy.
This is why Transformers just killed literally everyone and then made a new show.
But yeah, the fact that we skipping ahead a little bit to our to the
Mm,
next episode, like the fact that in the teaser there is a new Digimon that like we know nothing about. Like Argomon in the Argomon/Algomon in the first intro arc, the first three episodes, was
mm.
kind of a new Digimon. Like that form, like there were new forms introduced in the show, but like the concept of Agumon wasn't like was in a movie before. But this new Eismon is the name that I think has been announced kind
Hmm.
of outside the show. But the fact that there are these new Digimon that are coming up in the show and like are intimidating, threatening villains that we have never seen before is exciting.
Yeah, this is the next episode preview is maybe the most excited I've been about the show since it premiered.
Yeah, I think I'm personally at like a this episode found me at a low point of like because basically once we got the Metal Grammon episode and I was like, okay, are they just gonna repeat this 5 times more? And then we got a like dump of titles and synopses of future episodes, and it was like, yeah, there's
They
gonna
sure
be
are, champ.
there's gonna be a Where Grumon episode, I don't remember the order now, a Lilymon episode, a like you know what I'm saying, like
Yeah,
a list of ultimates, and it was like, okay, I am excited to see these happen, I guess, but like we knew exactly where things are going for the last 6 weeks, and so now to be like, okay, we've reached the end of that runway. What the hell is gonna happen now? And we got the biggest curveball we could, kind of maybe.
maybe. I still think it's a fake out because the line of dialogue they have right before they get to the big twist at the end that they're maybe back in Tokyo is they talk about it feeling like wet and squishy. So that's coded digestive
Mm.
talk. We're actually inside the worm on the moon.
Oh, yeah, I wrote that off as like how you would describe like if you were in a cave and because as soon as I mean I kind of so the next episode there were a bunch of titles revealed for next episode and the two after that
Mm.
and all I'd seen from that was like Tokyo. There's Tokyo's gonna be a thing in these titles. And I was like, oh, okay, what? So as soon as they were in a cave and then like it cut to them later and it was like they were walking upstairs and I was like, these stairs don't look like a cave stairs. So I immediately when he was talking about it being slimy, I was like, maybe this is just how you would if you thought you were in a cave and suddenly you were in a Tokyo subway, how would you describe like having
Mm.
smooth pavement and stuff? But yeah, I
Mhm.
guess you wouldn't say smooth and like slippery or like slimy.
And, like, maybe I won't be mad if it turns out they're actually back in some version of Tokyo or anything. I'm just not I just have my twist radar on because the whole introduction there was weird. I don't know, I'm excited. I'm excited that they're gonna show me something I haven't seen.
Yeah, and yeah, it's definitely gonna be different than what we came to expect. I'm so confused by the structure of yeah, I mean, I guess from what we've seen in the next episode teaser, it could just be a single episode
Mm,
of like it could be this like illusion scenario that they resolve by the end of the episode or something. But like if it's anything longer than that, I'm so confused by the structure of like the show starting off being like, okay, there is this crisis in Tokyo, solve this crisis in Tokyo, find the holy Digimon, and now it feels like everything that's been happening has been like pulling us more and more away from the holy Digimon. It's like, okay, go the straight route. Here's the route exactly to the holy Digimon you need. And like when that happened, I was like, okay, we're gonna meet the holy Digimon in the next episode or two. And instead, it's like, nope, you can't go that straight route. Go this other route. And
mhm.
now, while they're diverted at the end of going down these other routes, they get diverted again into potentially Tokyo, maybe. And like, are they gonna resolve the crisis in Tokyo in this arc? Or like,
Yeah, and it's hard to tell just from that one glimpse we got whether this is a Tokyo where the power is back on, which is also weird.
oh, were they showing
Well, you get
power
that
again?
one glimpse of the buildings and it's daytime, so it's hard to tell whether
Mm,
that's just the sun glinting off things or if there are lights on.
hmm
I will say I hadn't really been bothered by the whole Tokyo power crisis thing because as an ongoing threat because of the extenuating factors, people run out of air in elevators and like
Mhm.
Tokyo has such high heat and such high humidity that probably people are going to die of heat stroke without without power sources, and so all the collateral damage made enough sense to me that this can be a ticking time bomb even if it's not nuclear missile intense. But then this last episode they're like, oh yeah, the world is healing, nature is returning, people are doing selfies on railroad tracks.
That that was such a weird, "Oh, we don't have power, so now let's, like, stand on train tracks," but it does feel that's a thing that could happen in real life, like, the
Yeah.
trains aren't running, go on the train tracks, nothing bad can happen.
Oh yeah, like I definitely believe it. I guess it just feels weird as a tonal choice after the ticking clock we've had for the last few episodes.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
But you know what? Okay, Digimon. All right, we're doing this now. That's where I'm at. This might as well happen.
Mhm, yeah, so it's a fun thing in how different it is. We don't know what to expect.
Yeah, yeah, I can't wait to watch next week's episode.
Yeah.
At even at the lowest points, with the episodes that I really didn't like very much, at no point have I thought so far, maybe I'll stop watching this. So I don't know if that says something about the show or just about me.
Yeah, the theoretical it raises in my mind is, like, how bad does the show have to get for people like us to decide not to watch it?
Mhm.
Like, I definitely consider that myself where I'm like, okay, I thought the first episode wowed me so much that I was like, it's worth reviving the podcast and doing a podcast about it every week. Now I'm like, okay, how bad does the show have to get for me to decide to not podcast about it? I haven't been near that bar yet, but like sometimes I worry about it. Like, where is that bar? But yeah. All right, so let's get into some three reviews. Golden Pelt said Zudomon himbofication sequence.
At Drew Softman said, Joe's Blizzard Adventure.
At Kurita Prime said emotional support Gomamon.
At Bored Individual, Et tu Frigimon.
At CC Staccato, Zudomon is hot.
At Andy Lucas TT, Cliffhanger Mountain Cliffhanger. That's a hyphenated word, but I'll give it to you.
At Megajimon22, Zudomon needs Stormbreaker.
At Togetic 2, Zudomon comes out. Good for him.
I think they included the image of Zudomon with the rainbow in this review. But Theodore Malgren said, hashtag train tracks challenge.
At Gigadramon22, Joe is worthy.
At Empire Will, animationless sliding works.
At Jahi Johnson, Ice Ice Baby.
At Thousand Lion, Joe Hero Kido.
At Leo Sketch, Digital Frostbite. Consequences?
At Dak and Jackster, Goo Goo Gajoob. I'm lost, but okay.
I don't know. There weren't any walruses or turtles in this episode. I got nothing. At Ursum Rablick, cool snow fight.
At Maybe Spino, cool Digivolution sequence.
At Marfer9, stop. Hammer time.
And last one at Dayon1231, Zudomon is Thor. All right, so on to some listener questions. First one came in from LAO Leo Sketch. The concept of digital frostbite is interesting. I'd be interested to see other digital hazards that could pose risks to the kids, not just their Digimon partners. But I get the feeling this is a one and done moment. Cross his fingers. And they'll say, P.S. Takeshi Kusuo, who is the voice actor of the Seiyu of Joe this time around, they said Takeshi Kusuo really sounds like the Japanese version of D. Bradley Baker, especially when the role calls for yelling or panic screaming. Listen to Joe screaming while Kakumon leaps and tell me you don't hear number 4 from Kids Next Door. So that was a lot of references that went over my head.
You've made me so sad, stranger. I mean, you're not wrong to say that Joe sounds like one of the most prominent professional background voice actors in cartoons, but now I'm sad about it. But oh gosh, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I think that stuff about digital hazards is super interesting because if you wanted, again, this is just me. Congrats, you've given me another opportunity to grap about what this episode could have done. But like, if you wanted to maybe have Joe be like, "Oh no, this is a digital problem. I can't solve it with my medical studying. I'll have to do something else to prove that I'm useful to the team." Wouldn't that have been interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with this. Like, oh, this would be a cool concept, and the trust to assume that it's actually going to extend to being applied outside this episode is takes too much trust.
Yeah.
At Andy Lucas TT said, I'm 99% sure it's a coincidence, but do you think the writers intentionally put the Hindu-named Garudamon with the Native American-themed Garudamon, the Norse-themed Zudomon, and Native American-themed Wolf Warrior Werewolf together for a reason? Especially with the Mesoamerican art style used in the ending. You could also see King of the Dinosaurs, King of the Insects, and Flower Queen, the other group. I'm sure I'm stretching here, but still. I agree with stretching, but I mean, it's fun. It's fun speculation. I don't know if the one that I thought was the biggest stretch was where Gurumon being Native American themed.
Yeah, I'm not, because he's got more of that punk slash bare knuckle boxing look to him.
I guess there's like parts of the styling of his like feathers and stuff that maybe is inspired by.
That could be. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I am out of my field and not an expert in this area, so
I'm too white to have an opinion here.
yes. But yeah, I definitely the one thing about the way the groups are split that I find odd is how this is something my boyfriend pointed out while we were watching that like it's weird how much the Yamato Sora Joe group has been riding their Digimon almost constantly. Like they're either flying on Garudamon or riding on Ikakumon or riding on Gurumon, whatever, briefly. But like they're always riding their Digimon, going across these vast distances. Whereas Taichi's group has been walking every time we've seen them. Like they have Digimon they could be riding Kabuterimon, but they've been walking the entire time. And it's like, what are these routes you split up where it's like one group walks and one group like goes long distance?
And we're gonna get there at the same time.
Yep. Even though that's not what we said when we coordinated, but and we can't communicate with each other, but
But we're here now.
we both made the same stupid decision, or we both made the same stupid. We both forgot what we had said in the exact stupid way, exact same stupid way. Megajimon 22 said, with Zudomon's Digivolution sequence showing Arkelomon as a reference to him taking prizes from other Digimon, what far-flung piece of Digimon lore would you like to see involved in the series? I'd like to see the Dark Ocean or maybe a reference to Frontier Spirit Evolution. Dark Ocean would be cool.
Dark Ocean actually mattering. A hot take.
So since you love Zero Two, I'm curious your take on this because I've always thought that I'm not an expert in Lovecraftian horror whatsoever, but my understanding of the things that make things effective cosmic horror, it feels to me like having a one-off episode where like you introduce this concept, introduce this huge villain that like wants to claim a character as their prize and then they never are brought up again. To me, that feels much more like terrifying that like that thing is still out there and could always be calling for you. But I know lots of people hate that about Zero Two.
I think that having something like that in the background can be effective. I think that O2 just forgot about it. I think there's a distinct difference. Because,
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
if you didn't want to explicitly bring it up again, you could still have background kind of elements in Ken's or Hikari's character struggles, but it just kind of goes away. It served its purpose, and we forgot about it now.
Well, you know, if you watch Try someday, you'll see it maybe be brought up and then also forgotten about. So
Why would you want me to watch Try? It'll just be me yelling about how they fridged the O2 cast for an
yeah.
entire season, and no one will be happy, least of all me, because all the people who appreciate what they're doing with the original Adventure Kids will just hear me yelling.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you yelled every scene where the characters should be bringing up these Zero Two kids in some way, or like raising them as a question, then your voice will be dead very soon. So very quickly. Uh,
Oh, someday,
yeah.
maybe someday. I'd rather watch Tamers first to show people like.
Oh yeah. That I don't think Tamer's not a perfect show, but it's definitely worth checking out. I'm trying to think of other like parts of Digimon lore. I even as someone who's like seen every single Digimon, I'm not I'm a basic Digimon fan that I only know stuff from the anime, so
I
I
mean,
don't know.
you know what I always liked from Digimon? The speaking of weird stuff from O2, the dark, not the little
Spores?
the spores, the dark spores. I always thought
Hmm.
those were interesting.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, and how familiar are you with I mean, if you haven't seen Zero Two in a while, like there's so much obscure kind of BS at the core of the spores and like how they corrupt Ken, because it's like he gets the spore from fighting Millenniumon, which is like a villain, which is like a thing that happens in the Wonderswan games. And Wonderswan is like a fusion of Machinedramon. Like I think it's supposed to be the Machinedramon from the original series, who
Hmm.
like comes back to life and then fuses with Chimeramon, which I think is supposed to be the Chimeramon that Ken makes, and they fuse to make Millenniumon, who then is the entity that like causes Ken to become the Digimon Emperor and make Chimeramon. So it doesn't make any sense.
That makes no sense at all. No. Yeah, my memory of the dark spores is more this emotional connection of I remember when I was a kid, I had this really profound reaction to that plot of just like, oh no, you're actually secretly not special and people can take away that
Mm,
from you at any moment. And also I always found Okuda to be like this profoundly sad character that I kind of like.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe the spores would mean nothing without that emotional connection, and it's a dumb plot device that they shouldn't bring back. But I remember kind of liking that arc.
Yeah, and I think the idea that like there are these other kids that are possessed with them, and like I forget how that is totally resolved, but I think it's like resolved in a way that's like, okay, you've been like, the like the biggest part of the damage has been undone, but like these are going to be with you for the rest of your life. Like you're always going to have to wrestle with us to some degree, and like it's not going to be easy, but like we all can support each other and help you through it. Is a really cool element they introduced in the last hour of Zero Two, and then
And it got mired in World Tour, which is cool when you're a kid and you're like, I don't live in Japan, but I could have a Digimon. But like, from a narrative perspective, is like, why are we wasting all this time?
yeah, that World Tour arc was so hype as a kid, and then is so disappointing as an
As an
adult.
adult, you're like, this is a terrible choice. Why have you done this?
Oh yeah, especially the when they represent other cultures, and it's just like you didn't even do the most basic research. You portrayed them like walking 5 feet to go across the entire continent of Australia. Like,
I mean, Gargoyles did the same thing when it had a world tour arc, so at least we can, cross cultures and shake hands in this very bad decision.
uh,
But that's my best answer. I'm actually a total Digimon noob. I'm sorry.
I think Millennium Mon would be a. So I want to say I'm going to correct myself because Millennium Mon is so controversial because it's this like huge intimidating presence from these video games that no one played that like
Mm,
silently plays this huge part in Zero Two that is not actually addressed in the show at all, but is like
that's wild.
yeah.
Like, that's fascinating.
And they're in Millennium Mon is in the new card game, so like we could be cursed by that again. And there's even more back like there so in Zero Two, there's a flashback to Ken. Maybe you've heard rumors about this, but like there's a
Mm-hmm.
flashback to when Ken got possessed by the Darkspoor, and
Mm-hmm.
there's like a kid that he's with in that flashback.
Uh-huh.
That kid shows up in Tamers
Really?
as the same character.
Hmm.
Like he ends up in the events of the video game getting thrown to a different dimension into the Tamers universe. So those video games are wild.
What the heck?
But he's the worst part of Tamers because he shows up and he like comes in like already fully evolved basically
Oh
and like having
no.
done no development and it's just like I'm the coolest.
Oh
And everyone's
no.
like, but as a kid I was like, wow, you are the coolest. As an adult, I'm like, you're terrible. Go away. Anyway, that's wild.
Sidebar. The
Yeah.
longest sidebar.
Digimon22 asks, do you think we'll see the perfect forms evolve to ultimate forms, or they'll be able to jump from child to ultimate like in 99 Adventure? Me personally, I'd like for them to jump from child to ultimate with cutscenes for everyone, finally.
Hmm.
I'd be fine with either, really.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if they used that as a way to kind of come back around to here's the characters we didn't give full fancy evolution sequences to. Like, I'd be fine with that, but otherwise, again, having evolution sequences every time isn't that important to me personally. So,
Yeah. And I think it's like, I think they've already been very careful in avoiding stuff the original show did, where it's like, oh, let's get to Ultimate. We have to show every character's every evolution just to fill time. And they've been pretty good about avoiding that, which is something I should be thankful for. So if we get to a point where they have to get, if multiple characters have to get to Mega each episode and they only do it through this stepwise evolution, like they have to show, like if they don't have a shortcut to go from child to Mega, what they'll probably just do is have, 2/3 of evolutions happen off screen. So it would be
mm.
cooler, I think, if it went right from child/rookie. But I'm not like, it's not something I care passionately about. Either one could work. Empire Will said, "What do you think? What do you think of the partner as life coach dynamic? In the original, they were a bit more like pets, always ready for a fight and extremely loyal. The ultimate evolutions seem to be coming from the Digimon's maturity more than the bond. This is an interesting observation. It's definitely been true of the last two episodes. I think a little bit less true for the ones before that, but like definitely, like Kabutarimon basically like gave Koshiro some advice, and Zudomon or Ikakumon gave Joe some advice, and those are both what unlocked their forms. And I think that's fitting for if they're supposed to be like somewhat more worldly and that they reached Mega on their own in the past at some point and maybe can kind of guide these kids more.
Mm.
But it's not, if this were the final step, I would find it frustrating. It's an interesting idea to explore because I think ultimately for it to feel satisfying for the characters, which are the kids which you care about more in the end, I think the kids will have to be the one that like find things out themselves.
I mean, there has been kind of a shift in this show that is one of the things I like about it, that is kind of a version of, I think, its appeal to kids as kids who wish they had the perfect pet who is their best friend, where like each Digimon is kind of exactly what that kid needs. Like we talked about
Mhm.
earlier, Gomamon is exactly the right level of teasing to Joe while also being really supportive of him and protective. And Gabumon is very sort of gently pushy with Yamato about trying to get him to open up and that kind of thing. And like I feel like those are the best partner scenes, are the ones that have kind of nailed that of somebody who's always by your side but is pushing you on the elements that you're weakest on. I really like that kind of those moments of character writing in 2020.
Hmm.
So I guess good. I don't think they always nail it either, but like when it works, I think it's those are the moments when the show's character beats tend to be their best.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think you're saying that when the partners are like they're the perfect thing to draw out the kid's personality is when it works best, and so sometimes that comes through in a like guiding them along with some more experience, and sometimes that is not. So
Like I really think they don't know what to do with Piyomon, except for the fact that she always needs Sora to protect her.
yeah, the fact that that like Digimon Encyclopedia entry on Biyomon mentioned like I forget it was like some aspect of her personality that's like not something we've ever seen on the show. Like something about
That
her like
she's really curious, which
yeah
404 not found.
yeah. It was like have you been watching the same show? Cause no. Oof.
Yeah.
So, the last question came in from Dak and Jackster. They asked, now that we've finally blown through the ultimate forms, how would you rank the 6 episodes based on their merits as an evolution episode, and how are you currently feeling about the show as a whole? I think we've talked about our feeling of the show as a whole a bunch, but yeah, how do you want to rank the 6 episodes?
I think the best was Koshiro's, and then maybe after that, maybe Yamato's after that, and then Mimi's because I really liked the Lilymon sequence. Then Joe's, then Sora's, and then Taichi's last.
I think a lot of my placements are vaguely similar.
Just like based on how much they felt like they were at least trying to do something as character episodes, or had one really standout element that they did an interesting thing with.
Yeah, yeah. Like you were saying earlier in the episode, and I didn't get a comment on that. Like each week of the show has had at least one thing that's been interesting enough to be like, okay, I feel satisfied by that one thing. So, like throughout these 6 episodes, it's varied for each one, like what that kind of thing has been. But yeah, I think I would put Koshiro's first, then Mimi's, especially as I was by like I still feel like it. When I look back on it, I'm like, oh yeah, that like made me feel something, or like was very effective technically. And then I think Joe's, then Yamato, then Taichi, then at the bottom Sora.
Mm.
Like that Sora one,
It
I think that
wasn't
was the worst one
great.
of the whole show.
It wasn't great.
Yeah. But I am so curious. Since we're talking about like the 6 episodes being a core chunk, my biggest concern for the show going forward is that it's going to be like, okay, we get 1 or 2 episodes, and now there is another 6 episode arc of the Mega Evolutions.
Oh, God forbid.
Yeah, but even if that happens, like if that means they're like what? So they're on episode 15 now. That would be like they're done with Mega Evolutions by 23 or 24. Like if that were the case, I'd be like, okay, I'm so intrigued what's going to happen after this that I would still find something to be excited by.
Yeah. I'd rather have the break though, because I think I worry that this show doesn't know how to. Right now, it doesn't seem like it knows how to build to a climax that doesn't involve a new evolution.
Yeah, it's like that's the only thing I can focus on at a time.
Hmm.
So like yeah, focus on something else for a little bit. Like have stories that aren't just about an evolution.
Yeah. And then we can get excited for wanting to see the mega ones.
Right, especially for returning fans, where like, oh my god, the ultimates are happening too soon. But I was really when I had my friend on Annie who hadn't seen any Digimon before, and she watched all these episodes, and it was like hearing her perspective that she wasn't like, oh, these ultimate evolutions are happening too soon, but she was still kind of like, who cares? Like everyone's getting them; they're not special, and
Hmm.
like they've been doling out evolutions so much that it's like, yeah, they're not special anymore.
Yeah. Like it doesn't it has to mean something in the rules of the show. Like this has to be something they've striven for. That's not a word. Like worked for somehow so
Mhm.
that we care because we observed how they've changed as opposed to being told that they changed and now they shonen power upped.
Yeah. Hmm. And like it shouldn't be like, oh wow, this exciting new form that like, is it exciting because they've been building to it for like 30 episodes, or is it exciting because they've been building up to it for two? And yeah, these ultimates have felt like there was only like a span of 2 episodes where an ultimate was a new concept that was actually exciting. Uh, yeah. The only other thing I had to mention on this episode was that the crest and the translation of Joe's as crest, I feel like this is kind of like a running theme in a couple episodes. Like I'm frustrated by the fact that the fandom consensus on what the Japanese term is sincerity.
Mhm.
So like people who are familiar with the dub, like the dub they call it reliability, right? And the Japanese term seijitsu that the fandom translates as sincerity. I'm like, I feel like that's such a like the term. The Japanese word means like sincerity or honesty or faithfulness, and I feel like sincerity is the one of those things that is not really Joe. Like
Right.
he's all about like being given a task or a role in society and being extremely like faithful to that.
Right. He's true blue. He'll see it. He'll see through whatever you need him to do. He'll be there in a
Right.
pinch. Which sincerity is part of that, but doesn't really encapsulate it well.
Maybe my trouble is that I like learned the term sincerity from the dub using it to describe Mimi. So like I think of sincerity as meaning like someone who is like when they're very honest or they're very like they don't put on a front or they don't disguise their emotions. I don't think of someone who like, like says they'll do something and then they commit to it fully.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's like kind of a point like you're sincere in your commitments or like you say you do something you would mean you'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you that I think of sincerity as like an emotional, as an emotional thing. So like component of Joe's character, but I wouldn't choose it as the defining word for it.
Hmm.
Like I can see why they didn't choose faithfulness for the dub because that's I'm sure it would have been a nightmare with lip flaps, but that strikes me as fitting.
And I feel like faithfulness, especially with his crest imagery being a cross, could be
Mhm.
problematic, especially in the 90s.
I am shocked that didn't get censored in some way.
Yeah.
I guess then you would have had to change all the toys too, and that's a fortune.
Well, yeah. Well, but I feel like this episode, like the way his kind of like arc was about being given a role and then kind of like being excited about having this role and then kind of like choosing his own role for himself. It to me kind of like reinforced my idea that like it's not about sincerity, it's about like loyalty or like responsibility. But some fans like decades ago chose sincerity and now that's what everyone will say. So oh well.
Oh, fandom.
Yeah. So yeah, how do you want to rate this episode out of 5 stars?
I'll give it 3 because I liked the B plot enough, and there were enough cute moments that Joe and Gomamon got that it wasn't. I feel like some of the worst episodes of this have been 2 stars for me, and this is slightly above that, so I'd give it 3.
Okay. I'm gonna give it 3.5 because I feel like I overall ended up really enjoying it. Like I feel like I've actually heard a lot of people complain about the animation in this episode, and that's something we haven't really talked about. That like, and I feel like I don't know, even if it had lots of luminous animation, it kind of worked on me a lot.
Hmm.
And like I was sold by the action, and I thought it was like a good like encapsulated premise of an episode. Like hey, you have this thing you have to do, like the stakes make sense, that like strategy makes sense, and it was a fun ride to go along with. But
Hmm.
Joe's character is disappointing. So I wish I could give it like 4 more, but because of Joe's character. Do you have an MVP?
MVP is Gomamon, who is basically always the MVP, unless somebody is even better than him. But he's so good in this.
Yeah. I guess I'll give it to Gomon as well. I'm like, did he really have that many moments? And then I'm like, okay, there was that moment where he like stood aside and was like, oh, it's gonna be my turn next. Like, okay, just even that, like, and he also like, he got his big shonen action moments. All right, so we already kind of talked about it, but next week's episode is going to be episode 17, the Jet Black Shadow invades Tokyo, and there's going to be a creepy Digimon behind the scenes in quote unquote Tokyo. Lots of creepy eyes. Taichi's team learns a shocking truth. Yeah. Do you have any other feelings about that we didn't talk about before?
Uh, no, not really. Except that I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I'm like mostly interested in it for the meta level because if it's a one-off, like they're in some Digimon's belly and it's like a simulation or whatever, then it's like okay, that's like an interesting one-off episode. But like what it means for the structure of the show is like enough to make me be like very very shocked and excited for.
Yeah, depending on what shocking secret means, whether it's an advertising fake out or whether there is some conspiracy at work here, it could go a lot of different directions.
Yeah, like my most pessimistic take, the worst case scenario, shocking truth is it's not actually Tokyo, but
There were Digimon in the government all along.
I'm just so like we still haven't even like met Devimon. We still haven't gotten anywhere close to the Holy Digimon. Like if there is like stuff attacking Tokyo now, like
Yeah,
what's
it's wild they're pulling a Myotismon plot for when we haven't even and we haven't seen Devimon in like this entire arc.
yeah. Like that's something I miss about since Ogamon's been gone. Like we haven't had any through line to like this army they're fighting against actually feeling like a coherent thing that like is organized at all. It's just oh another Digimon showed up and they have bad breath. Oh no, let's defeat them. Okay, we murder them. Cool. Next one. Ugh. Oh well.
Yeah.
All right. So Is there some other non-Digimon thing you want to recommend to everyone?
Yeah, I have two quick ones if that's all right. One that will
Yeah,
make
sure.
people angry and then one to cheer you back up. So first the first one is a limited podcast series called Running from Cops, which is it's like 6 or 8 episodes and it's like these little 30-minute looks into the history of the TV show Cops, which if you're younger than me was a reality TV show about cops arresting people, and this journalist looked into the history of it and the links between Cops coming on the air, 20 plus years ago, and the increase in arrests over tiny, sometimes fabricated issues and harassing, transient people and just people of color in neighborhoods because we need something for good TV. We need to have an arrest per episode, and it's fascinating. It's really good journalism. It will make you super super angry about this process of turning police work into entertainment over the years and the knock-on effect that's had on everything else in American society. So then once you're done being angry about that, my actual recommendation is OKKO, Let's Be Heroes, which is a really good cartoon.
Mm.
It was created by Ian Jones Quartey, who worked on as a one of the main boarders on the first several seasons of Steven Universe. He's actually Rebecca Sugar's partner, and it
Mm.
was also co-created by, oh gosh, I have to look, the creator of Regular Show, Toby Jones, and it only ran for 3 seasons. It unfortunately got canceled. It's a lot sooner than a lot of Cartoon Network shows, but it's this big hodgepodge mashup of these kids who live in a plaza, and everything is sort of based on fighting and heroes and villains, and it's just a really fun cartoon. I think it was sort of a niche success for people because it's unlike the more popular cartoons in like the Gravity Falls, Over the Garden Wall, Steven Universe that are meant for a like 10 to 14 age range. This one aims just a little bit younger, like 6 to 11, so it is more embracing of that very cartoon aesthetic. There's a story I love where the creators talk about, we make this look just a little bit janky every episode on purpose because we want our audience of kids to look at this and be like, oh man, I could draw better than this. I could go into
Mm.
animation someday, which is so heartwarming to me. And it's also, the creators are big Sonic fans. Like, they actually managed to get the license to do a real crossover before the end. And it's that amount of fandom is just cute all the way through. It also managed to get some neat representation in there too. One of the main characters, Enid, is bi, and she ends up with a lady at the end. And then the two amazing, very Team Rockety villains, Lord Boxman and Professor Venomous, are also in a relationship. And that also has the best story attached to it, where Professor Venomous is this character who has this very horny design and originally looked like this sort of very Dr. Wily-esque old character. And then one of the boarders, Ryan Shannon, was, when they had his intro episode, was like, what? No, you can't use this design. It doesn't make any sense for Lord Boxman to be trying so hard to impress this guy. He's got to be hot. And I thank God for Ryan Shannon every day. But yeah, OKKO is just such a fun show. It's so creative and dynamic in the animation it does, in the breadth of homage that it does. It can be a little bit hard, I think, for people to get into because of the ratios of episodic to plot episodes. I think at one point I made a list of the plot relevant episodes that I could send you for the show notes if you wanted.
Sure.
But even its one-off episodes, like it did one, it had this episode about gun violence that I find really interesting, just because it's this evidence that it's not, the fact that the show is for kids doesn't mean it doesn't ever get weird or get dark. It just does these things with the knowledge of who its audience is and the way that they process serious issues like loss of parents or gun violence or, personal emotional trauma. And it's a very special little show that I kind of hope that more people will find now that it's over with. And yeah, I don't know. Okay, KO is good. It makes me happy.
It's cool. I didn't realize it was over. I thought it was. I assumed it was still going. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, it got canceled after their second season. They were able to do a third, but it's only like a 15 episode third season, which was
Mm,
enough time for them to get through all the main plot beats that they wanted to do, but without the kind of time to do all of the extra fun stuff they wanted to do in between, you know. The last episode is really poignant and good. It made me tear up a little bit.
that's cool.
So, yeah, it's a very easy show to just both kind of binge and just pick and choose and watch.
Okay.
And I hope, and if you watch it, tell me about it on Twitter, because I want to I love when people watch things that I think are good. Validate my taste.
That's really cool. For my recommendation, I struggle because lately all I've been doing is watching really bad reality TV that like I don't generally believe in guilty pleasures, but like violates my moral conscience to recommend people actually watch Vanderpump Rules because it's bad, but I keep watching it um so instead I guess I will recommend people to listen. Since you mentioned a podcast, it reminded me of a podcast I listened to recently from Planet Money. I'll link to this specific episode, and it's about oh boy, apparently over the last, I think it was 3 or 4 decades, basically like the fact that we have recycling labels printed on all plastic is basically a profit making scheme by oil companies to make us think that all plastic is recyclable when it's not. So that's a whole giant can of worms. And if
Huh.
you are interested in that and want to hear more about how basically our entire assumption about how recyclable things are is all an evil manipulation by evil capitalists, then you should go listen to this episode.
That's fascinating. That's like that great article about how basically the entire quantity of glitter in the United States comes from like literally two factories in New Jersey. And the mystery of there are some major US institution that is like the number one purchaser of glitter, but they wouldn't tell the reporter who it was.
Right, right, right.
Probably the cops.
Because it was talking about how like how glitter was used in something that you definitely use. It's
Mhm.
a common household item the glitter is in. They just don't know glitter is in it, which is even more terrifying.
Super interesting article.
Yeah,
Anyway.
we'll link to both those. So that brings us to the end of the show. And last week's Digiprompt was, what scenario in all of Digimon do you feel is or was the most personally relatable to you and why? And my favorite response came in from Zorak Richardson, and they said, pretty much all of Jerry's arc. Presenting oneself as normal and even eccentric at school. Adventuring and having a courage that wasn't loud or boisterous. Going numb post-repeated trauma, and also ultimately fighting for her literal right to exist. A multifaceted handling of grief. Plus, less serious answer, Dub TK saying, I want to take him home with me about Angemon. Young me didn't have the words and solid understanding to be able to know, but I was fully just gay for him. And I totally agree with you on that front. I was very torn in picking these answers because there was one that was about Ken, and I was like, oh, I'm so torn about Ken. And
Oh.
I know Vrai would appreciate one about Ken, but
Oh, but this seems good.
yeah, so this week's Digiprompt is, since Zudomon is vaguely based on Thor's hammer, what other figure from mythology would you like to see in Digimon Adventure 2020, regardless of whether they already exist as a known Digimon? Send your Digiprompt responses and general feedback to potages@gmail.com, potages on Twitter, or in the episode comments on our website, potages.com. If this is your first episode, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or on a traditional podcast app. And if you want to support the podcast, share it with your friends who not only distract your enemies, but also refuse to let them cross bridges. And please leave a review for the podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out. I'm Definitely Jeff on Twitter. You can also check out my general anime podcast, Love It a Wee Bit, where we are reviewing stuff this season. This season of anime has had a lot of interesting, good things that I think are worth checking out. So I think it's a good time to dip in if you don't normally watch new anime. So Vrai, thank you so much for coming on the show. Very great to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is always a lot of fun, even when the show is not living up to my honestly reasonable expectations. Get on it, Digimon.
Yeah, you should be doing exactly what we tell you to do.
Exactly. Cater to me specifically.
Just rename it Vry's Digimon Adventure 2020.
Make it gayer.
Oh, there's so much room for gayness. Like, come on. So if people want to check out more of your stuff online, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at WriterVry, which is where I post most of the freelance work I do. You can check out the site I work for at animefeminist.com, or you can find Trash and Treasures, which is the podcast I do with my partner, at TrashPod, or by looking up Trash and Treasures on your podcatcher of choice. We recently did an episode on a Crow tie-in book that was, speaking of gay shit, really interesting. Kind of a mess, but really interesting.
Cool. Well, all right. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with another guest next week to talk about episode 16, The Jet Black Shadow Invades Tokyo. Bye.
Bye.
And remember, never stop digivolving. Speaking of, did you ever play Ski Free?
I did not.
Okay, so for people, for listeners who aren't aware, Ski Free was I played it on like Windows 95 computers, and it was like I think it was installed on every computer. I don't know how I got it, but it was just like a very simple game that you just skied down a mountain and avoided obstacles. And the only thing I knew about the game is it terrified me because at some point,
Hmm.
if you played long enough, you would always get eaten by an abominable snowman who would come out of nowhere. Like you'd be doing great, and then just a snowman would come out of nowhere and eat you. And I'd be like, what the hell?
Here's some free trauma, children.
But looking up recently, apparently it was like there was a fixed amount of like just to go 2,000 meters, and then if you go past that, the game's like there's no more terrain to go, so the snowman's gonna eat you. And it's like, oh, okay. I thought it was just like a constant terror. Like I was scared to play the game because I thought the snowman was always gonna eat me. But
Oh,
um, you know, this episode reminded me of that, but we didn't have any.
but there was no terror.
Yeah.